for you now. We gonna make it mellow now.
Hey, the parts really came out nice. All clean, no grease, no grime. All the discoloration has been removed. Ready to go, ready to install. So we'll put them back on the machine here. The one thing that I do is on the tension spring, I put a little coat of sewing machine oil. This is really almost the only part I've ever seen rusty on one of these. I mean, on real bad machines, I've had some rust on the disc or the thread guard, you know, but this is, I don't know the difference of the types of steel, but it's not quite as polished or have any chromium on it, so I just like to put a little coat of oil on there. And then I'm going to start with the tension stud, which I sometimes call the pole, and if I called it the post or the pole, sorry about that. It's technically called the tension stud. And I'm going to put the tension releasing pin. If I remember how black looking that was, it really came out shiny now. And I'm going to put that pin back in there. There we go. Remember I was telling you about this? See how it just kind of drops nice and clean now. When I put this in, I want to put it so that the opening of the slot is pretty horizontal. Now you notice before it was a little crooked, maybe like that. And some people like to do that. And it has to do with the tension indicator and the dial. And it's kind of because the way it sets up, when it turns to 0, they think it's not lining up right there. It lines up a little. When 0 is on here, you can still turn the knob a little bit to the left. But I like to go ahead and put it horizontal so that the dividing bar between the plus and minus is going to be straight up. And if you want to put that on there temporarily while you put it in the machine, that's a good way to see how level it is, you know. So let's get up here with the machine, and we'll just make sure your pin is in. Don't forget that pin. And we'll just put it right into the hole for it and make sure it's pushed, that the tension stud is pushed all the way back. If I can get this a little bit closer to you. Still try and be in focus. A pretty good light, we'll try that. So I'm standing up to look over the camera, and I can look straight down here and see that divider, but you don't need to do that. You can just look straight on the stud and try and get it, you know, pretty level. But however you want to do it, or even if you want it level, get it where you want and hold it in steady, and then come back to this tension stud set screw and turn it in. Make sure that it is in there snug so that this will not turn or wiggle or anything. Okay, then we're going to start with the other parts here. We're going to take the let's see, I'm going to make sure that's in the camera, the thread guard, and we're going to put the two studs in there with the convex sides facing each other. So we've got that space between them, right? And then we're going to put the check spring over that as the assembly. And I remembered I call it the small loop and the big coil. They actually called this the eyelet, but it's pretty much got to go with the big coil on the back and the eyelet in the front. And then I have found if you put that guide post that goes in the machine up on the top and arrange the spring so that the tail is kind of hanging straight down towards the top of the table, that will put that little spring tail up around 12 o'clock up at the top. And then you just slowly guide this in here. Once you get it on there, you're less likely to slip, so you can maneuver that around a little bit. See, it wants to creep around a little bit. And then you're going to get to the point where it's got to select a spot to go into those gear teeth things. So I picked one that looks like the spring will hang straight down, and I pushed it all the way back, and the little guide post went into the machine. So that looks pretty good to me. Hanging down there. So when you feel it, you got it where you want, just hold it in place, and you're going to flip the checkup spring up there. There's a little arm sticking out on the thread guide, and it's called the stop. And that's where the check spring movement will stop and rest. Okay. So, next, we'll just take the indicator, plus, minus, stick it on there, and then that holds the base of the tension spring, or beehive spring, and the first little coil, you know, it's like horizontal there, right, and the loop, the boat bottom or the cup bottom, goes on the bottom. I don't know, could you see that? Just right in the split. Okay. Then the stop spring, and the little crooked finger, I call it, or the post. There's a technical name I don't remember, but the tip of it should point towards you. And what that does, here's my tension screwdriver. On the inside of the dial, right at or next to the number 0, behind the 0, on the inside of the dial, behind the 0, there's a little post in there. I think you'll be able to see it, but it's there, and that finger of the stop washer is going to hit that post when you're turning the thumb nut. So it's going to go over by the 0 and stop, or it's going to go all the way around by the 9 and stop. So you just put that stop washer right on there with the finger pointing at you. Wow, look at that, you're almost done. Then this dial, we're going to set it on there with the number 2 up above that finger. So you got your number 2, you got the line between the plus and the minus, and that's all lined up kind of straight up and down. And now we're going to put on the thumb nut, and of course we're going to put it with the knurled knob towards you, so that the pin and kind of the rough looking side is towards the machine. Okay, and we're going to just get it started. And you never want to force the threads on that stud. So I usually just hold it as level as I can and kind of turn it backwards, left, until I feel it settles in. Oh, I thought I had it there. Almost did. And take your time on this. Really take your time. Just turn it left until you feel like a little click and it feels level. I wonder if I could get this up higher. Maybe you can look down on it then. I want my number 2 up, and I can. And it's kind of weird because you push forward and you want to kind of turn left gently. I always kind of have trouble with this when I'm standing up. I'm making this look harder than it will be for you if you're sitting down and looking right at the post there. So as I was turning left, I finally got a little snick, click, like, and it's seated properly. Now it very easily, no stress, will turn to the right. And you're going to kind of hold that dial and push back a little bit, you know, and then turn it, and that pin is going to pop into one of the holes. Okay? It's going to pop into one of the holes. Then make sure your tension, or make sure your pressure foot is lever is down, and you got the pin in there. Then you're going to go, now turn it left to 2, and it'll stop. I mean, turn it left to 0. So now my 0 is lined up with everything. I could go a little farther left, but just go to the 0 area, more or less, right there. Okay. Now we're going to, and then it should be loose. See how loose that is? Because there's pushed back, there's 0, turn left, there's 0 tension. Okay. Then I temporarily set the lid on here. It's not even screwed down, but I got a spool of thread, and I'm just going to come through the top thread guide and into the disc. Make sure you get between the disc, right? And then I'm going to lift up that check spring get get my thread over that positioning finger. So lift the thread straight up and drop it down on your side of the positioning finger. Okay, then you can put it behind the upper thread guide. And with the take up lever up, you can go ahead and thread it through the take up lever if you want. Okay. And then as you start pulling the thread, you want barely any resistance here. And I can feel a little resistance. This is one of the machines that it doesn't say anything about grams of pull or anything. I'm doing it kind of the way they describe it here. And if you feel a little pull, then as you start turning it to the right, like I'll go to number 2, I hardly have any. I'll go to number 4. It's starting to go. You can see it bouncing the spring up. So I think that's a little bit light to me. So I'm going to go back to the 0. And this is the good part of this type of unit. I'm going to push the dial in and back so I can get it off the pin, and I'm going to turn the knob, and I'm going to go over, boom, click one hole. To the right is more tension when you're doing this, and to the left is less. Now I'm going to try my 0. Oh, see, it almost wants to start lifting up that thread guide. So let me try it now. I'll put it on 2. Oh, it's lifting it up pretty good. I'll put it on 4. Oh yeah, I feel more tension now. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, all the way. Pretty good tension. So that's where I'm going to leave it for now. That's called zeroing out the tension. Okay? And then when I'm doing my sewing test, if I don't feel that's enough tension, right, I will pressure bar down. I will push the dial in away from the thumb nut pin, and I'll turn it some more to the right. And then I'll try that. If that feels good, I'll leave it there. You know, if my initial setting, when I started to sew with the machine on like 3 or 4, you know, and it felt too strong, I would push the dial in and turn the thumb nut a little to the left and let it go back in a hole on the dial to lighten the tension. And that's what I like about this. There's no adjusting nut, there's no screw, it's just the dial and the thumb nut. If you want a little more tension on a certain setting, like 4 is a very common setting for a singer, and if you say, that's not enough tension, it doesn't feel right, push that dial in, hold it back from the pin, Whoop. Sorry, hard to do over the camera. Push that dial away from the pin and turn it again to the next hole. There. And then you say, yeah, now that feels like 4 to me. That's what I want 4 to be. That's all there is to it. So you can, anytime you want, press your foot down, just push that dial away from the back of the thumb nut to get the pin out of the dial, and turn it left or right until you find what works best on your particular machine. I mean, I could take the dial off and I could mark that hole, and I could take this tension unit and put it on your 301, and it might be the same tension on the thread, but on your particular machine and bobbin case, it might be a little too much tension or not quite enough. So it is so easy to adjust these and turn it one little hole at a time, to the right for more tension, to the left. And once you find what you like, you're done. Then you control your tension just by turning left to lower, right to higher. A lighter fabric, maybe a lighter tension, heavier weight, denim and a big old number 18 needle, maybe you're using number 6 tension. Depends on the thread, the fabric, the needle. But that's basically zeroing it out, so when the pressure bar lever is down, putting tension, letting the spring put the tension on, and you're pulling the thread through there, you can tell, oh yeah, there's some drag on the thread. I can tell something's dragging, you know. I'm setting it 0 and something is dragging it there. Okay. Now some people thread it all the way down and pull on that thread off the tip of the needle. I've seen them do that before. And I've never done that because the service manuals that I've ever worked with have all talked about threading the unit and zeroing it out. And some of them tell you just put a piece of thread through here, like take a 12-inch piece of thread and put it through the disc, put the foot down and like pull back and forth on it and see, up, no drag, tighten it up. There's a little bit, tighten it up. Up, too much, loosen it up. Okay, that's good. So this is kind of what I did is what's described in the instructions and kind of the way I learned from the old Singer guys, and you know, kind of a classic method. But the main thing is that you understand how the tension works and what it does. You know, pressure bar up, push pin against the indicator, indicator against the spring, spring against the stop washer, no tension on the disc. Good for threading, or when you lift up and pull your fabric out and the thread can just come right out, no problem. Foot down, tension on the thread. How much tension? Depends on what you set. That's why it's numerated, so you can remember. You know, like, oh, I started a project last week and then I got busy. On 4 days later, I'm back and I'm going to sew this seam, and oh yeah, it was on a 4.5, was really nice stitch. That's why it's numerated like that. Okay. Install all the tension unit parts and zero it out. So all that's left is to set the tension if it's bad and set the stroke. If you have to change the stroke, it's that little screw right there. So you thought it just held on the thread guard, but it's adjustable too. So let me get set up for that and we'll do those two things.
Hi everybody, I'm Archie with the Drells of Houston, Texas.